listeners may not know, but it has to be a completely sterile space. Beekeeping can be a dirty job at the best of times, and insemination it requires sterile everything, because the queen can catch infections when you're inseminating her. So we created this horse float breeding lab, that now means that I can then take that to my apiaries or however far my desires extend in inseminating in the future. So, I could, in 10 years when I'm proficient at it, can travel down the coast or up to Queensland or down to Tasmania or wherever the little horse
That's a really
trailer
cool
can
idea.
go. Yeah, because everything's kind of set up in there. I mean, I'm grafting out of there now. A lot of people that rear their own queens graft in their car, in the passenger seat of their car. Um, and I have done that too, but gee, it's nice having a space with drawers where all of your gear is and your grafting tools and your queen cups and everything's in there. So it's kind of a multi-purpose space. But the good thing about the horse float too is that it can also be used to haul hives around if I need to. We've got tie downs in the floor, and I can put honey supers in there. So it's a really good multi-purpose kind of thing that I think I'll get a lot of use out of, and it looks fantastic. So that helps too. It's a very pretty office.
What do you foresee are going to be the biggest challenges? Like just now that you're
um,
starting it, what do you think the biggest challenges will be?
so I know that managing drones is what really trips people up. Um, Getting the timing right to raise enough drones to collect the semen because it has to be enough drones at the appropriate maturation of those drones to be able to collect semen, and there's a lot of practice involved in collecting the semen, but also you have to kind of inseminate many, 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 many queens to become good at it. So I know that there's a definite learning curve coming up, um, but I have the time to practice. Not that I have this, I don't mean time as in free time. I don't have a lot of free time. The colonies and the queen rearing is really time heavy, but I have many years ahead of me in beekeeping. So it's an exciting prospect to know that there's a whole career ahead of me in beekeeping. Before beekeeping, I was a graphic designer, and I didn't enjoy that, not nearly as much as I do with beekeeping. So I can see myself, and inseminating queens is not lifting massive, heavy honey boxes. It's not having to travel halfway across the state for pollination. Um, so those options for me in my stage of life now were really off the table because I've got young kids. So really difficult for me to get into any sort of like pollination contracts because those guys are on the road so much. So yeah, it's I love the finer detail work too. So I think that's probably what attracted me to raising queens in the first place. I was thinking back, trying to work out what exactly it was that got me interested in queen rearing in the first place. And I think it was um, I had was looking after some hives in Kiama, and one of them was queenless. And I took a frame of brood from the queen right colony and put it into the queenless colony. And of course, they went nuts trying to raise queens as they needed to because they didn't have any brood. So they were desperately trying to raise queens out of that frame that I had put in there. And when I went back in there and found that there was a laying queen in there, I was just hooked immediately. I was like, wow, I actually helped this poor queenless colony to create a new queen. And I just thought that that was incredible as a beekeeper that you can have that influence over the colony. So that, I think that's what probably got me going into that direction of queens. And also just because there's so much of what the colony is. You really learn quickly that a lot of what you work with as a beekeeper is dependent on a queen bee. It's the temperament, it's the colour, it's the ability to, have a bumper crop of honey. When you take out all of the environmental things, the queen is carrying those genetics that have the traits that you see as a beekeeper. And watching some, spicy hives, I call them. I don't like to call them defensive because they're actually just very good at what they do. And I think it does them a disservice to say that they're angry bees or aggro bees. They're actually just really good at defending themselves. And it's hard to work with a queen like
I know
that.
people who drive around my house that are really good at defending themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I've known some of those people as well. They're spicy. Yeah, so I think like watching a queen, putting it, getting rid of a queen that in a colony that's spicy, and then replacing her with a queen that comes from good genetics, and seeing the temperament of a colony change in front of you is the best part of beekeeping, I think. I love watching a spicy hive, the temperament change over that 6-week period, and often, like, again and again and again, I see it happen sooner than that. But I love giving people queens that say they have a defensive colony, knowing that they're going to get that joy as well of seeing their colony change and become nice to keep bees. So, yeah, I think that's probably where it all...
One thing I want to go back to just there, you said that you gave a frame of eggs to a colony without a queen.
Yes.
Is that right? That's actually,
Yeah.
for some people don't know that you can actually do that. If you've got multiple colonies and one of them goes
Yes.
queenless, you can do that. You
Yeah.
can give them a frame
Yeah.
of eggs and they
Yeah.
can raise their own queen.
Yeah. And sharing those resources it's one of the reasons why I always suggest to people definitely have more than one hive. There's a lot of benefits to that, but one of those is sharing the resources. And if without a queen, you will quickly have no colony at all. So being in the position where you can share a frame of brood if it's weaker, or if a colony is, one colony is really not, bursting as much as the other one, you can give them a frame of anything that they're deficient in, sharing those resources within an apiary so that we're creating a very good management of disease, so we're not spreading it around and around, is one of the best reasons why people should have, at the very least, 2 colonies so that you can compare. So that, because otherwise you don't know if your colony is supposed to be like that unless you have something to compare it to. Yeah, but being able to move a frame of eggs over in an emergency is just being able to be there, responding to what you're seeing at the time and being able to help them straight away. And that's so much of beekeeping, isn't it? Like,
it
just
works pretty good.
Looking.
Before I raised my own queens, that's how I got queens. You know,
Yeah.
I just go through. I remember I would always do it sort of mid spring, and I would just go through and any colonies that had a failing queen or a queen that I didn't like or no queen, I'd just do that, and you get about a 60
Yeah.
or 70% success. It's not amazing, and I definitely wouldn't do that anymore. These days, I
Yeah.
when I do my inspections, I always go with a few mated queens, and I just put a mated queen in there, but it
Yeah.
works. It works, just not as good
Yep.
as, you know,
Yeah.
putting a mated
At the
queen.
right time of year, where I think bees like to raise queens when bees also like to swarm, which is spring, because they are built for that. They're built to, the population's increasing a lot at that time of year. And, that's why they've been on Earth for millions of years, is because it's a natural thing for them to swarm. So they want to raise queens at that time. That's why they throw out a lot of drone bees into the area, because they know that there's queens, virgin queens, that are going to be up in the air soon. So when the weather's great and you've got the right time of year and you've got a strong colony, it makes beekeeping very easy to raise queens then. You wouldn't do that going into winter, because the intention of the colony is not to raise queens then. But at the right time of year, it's easy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's set into a few questions. So I've got a few questions,
Yes.
Flora, here. Now, if you're listening to this and you'd like to send in a question, just go to the show notes for this episode, and there's some instructions there for sending a question to me. You could also leave a voice message with your question if you like. And the first question tonight, Laura, is how to identify and deal with a failing queen.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because beekeeping a lot of the time is being able to read the frame. And when I say read the frame, I literally mean shaking some bees off the frame and getting up with the sunlight behind you so that you can get that light down inside the cell and you can see what's going on. And that's called reading the frame. So you want to see a whole heap of things going on that frame. You want to see honey, depending on which frame you're taking out. If it's on the, let's just assume it's on one of the inner frames, that's where the brood nest is. You want to see some capped honey around the top. You want to see a little bit of pollen. It's kind of like that rainbow arc shape. And a good laying queen will have what we call a solid laying pattern. It means that she's not missing many cells on that frame. She's done very well at laying an egg in all of the cells next to each other, so that it almost can sometimes look like a solid wall of brood where she hasn't missed any. And a really great queen has that solid brood pattern, and it's that solid wall of brood that she's laid in every single cell. But when we have a failing queen, she might be aging, she might not have mated very well, she might be injured for some reason. Then we'll start to see some difference in that brood pattern. It will look like she's missed a whole heap of cells. So you'll have kind of like a shotgun pattern, where there's a whole heap of spots where she hasn't laid eggs, and it's not all clustered together nicely. You'll see an increase, a abnormal amount of drone brood, which is the bigger cells that kind of pop out a lot off the cell. They're the boys. And the reason for that with an aging queen is she only has a certain number of eggs that have been fertilized from her mating flight, and the rest of the eggs that are in her spermatheca are unfertilized eggs. And then when she lays one of them, it becomes a drone. So if you have a queen that might be 5 years old, unfortunately they don't live forever. And I'll tell you a story about that next. Is that you'll see a lot more drones being laid in combination with a really shotgun pattern of brood. And then you may know that you bought that queen 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and the colony size is also getting a lot smaller than what you would expect it to be. They're all signs that your queen's kind of coming to the end of her lifespan. There may be some, the bees may also be trying to raise some supersedure cells, which are the cells, the queen cells that are often found in the middle of the frame. You get the swarm cells that are right down the bottom and on the edges, but they might have picked, because they do, when bees do their job, when we don't get involved, a queen will live out her lifespan, or live out her predetermined amount of fertilized eggs, and the bees will recognize that she's coming to the end of her kind of productive years, and they will choose another larvae to raise, which is called the supersedure queen, and they'll start to feed that exclusively royal jelly, and that will be her daughter queen that will eventually emerge, go on a mating flight, and kill the old queen. So some commercial guys replace their queens every year, because a queen will never lay in her life as well as she does in that first 12 months. And when you're in it for producing honey, you want that colony to be as robust and big as possible. So replacing your queen on a regular schedule is a really good idea. A lot of the natural beekeeping community leaves the bees to do what they do naturally, which is replace the queen when they need to. And that's great too. There's so many different ways to beekeep. But looking out for that signs of a failing queen means that you can help them when they need it. You can get rid of that old queen and put a new queen in before if it's midsummer, you're fine. If it's autumn, you might find yourself in trouble, because we want our colonies to be going into winter the strongest possible state that they can. And if you're going through autumn with a failing queen, they're not going to cope through winter well, and they're certainly not going to come through spring very well. So I personally don't replace all of my production queens every year. I probably do it every 2 years though. I'm not in the business of making huge amounts of honey. I stock in a couple of places locally, but I do care that the colony is strong. So I replace those honey production colonies every 2 years or so. So I had one of my most favourite breeder queens last season passed away. I don't know if that's a ridiculous way of saying it, but I was very,
She was
very emotionally
superseded.
attached. Yeah, she was. And I was, has that ever happened to you where you've had to, you had a little bit of emotional attachment to one queen, and they don't live forever. And it's a natural part of the colony life that the queen's going to, be superseded at some point.
Yeah, well, I've got
Um,
a 3-year-old breeder that I was just having a look at today, and she's barely doing anything anymore. For some reason, she's
yeah,
not getting superseded, but I'm just letting her. She's retired, well and truly, and
yeah,
I'm just letting her
yeah,
hang out. Yeah, it's
yeah.
just nice to sort of still
Are
see
you
her. And
grafting? Are you grafting like crazy from her to try to get as much of her genetics to hold on to?
no, I'm in vain trying to use her as a drone mother, but today I finally took the drone frame out. She just wasn't laying in it. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I do get a
So
bit
this
emotional.
yeah, I had a cry about it actually. And so I knew that this colony was wanting to supersede this queen. She was of the age where, you would expect it to be that last season or this season, definitely. And they had raised a couple of supersedure cells, but I was in denial at that stage. I was just, this queen's going to live forever because she's amazing. And anyway, they continued to raise supersedure cells, and the colony size was dwindling. There was a lot more drone brood in there, and just drones generally. There's a large number of drones, and the definitely her laying pattern had become quite dreadful when it had been years and years and years before that been spectacular. So there was definitely something that was amiss. Anyway, I went into it. I must have missed one of the supersedure cells, and she was a marked queen. Anyway, I went in one day, pulled out a frame, and lo and behold, there was a virgin queen walking around on the frame, and my heart dropped, and I thought, great, she's gone. This virgin has gotten rid of her. And I got a little bit upset about it, put that, caught her in a cage so that I could really work out and give myself that, 5 minutes of breather time just to work out what I needed to do. That's always a good idea too. If you need to just, gather yourself, firstly, make sure the queen's safe and you know where she is. So pick her up in a claw clip or in whatever queen cage you've got, just so that you can have 5 seconds to think about what needs to be done. So I picked up the Virgin Queen in a cage, and I thought, oh, I wonder though, there could be 2 queens in this colony. I picked up the next frame, and there she was, still walking around the frame. So she was moved with some frames into a nuke, 5-frame nuke, to go into her retirement home. And the supersedure queen went on to mate and is laying today and is brilliant. But the original queen, still in a 5-frame nuke, that just kind of went downhill, and I had to call it one day and say, no, she's gone skis. But it was an emotional roller coaster for me, because there were hundreds and hundreds of queens that I had grafted from this breeder queen, and I was really, really attached to her. But it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it does from time to time, less and less these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have let a few live for a long time. There was one that she was just down to 1 frame in the end. Just went down to 1 frame.
I feel sorry for them too, because they do such a good job for us as well. But she had a good life.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's have a look at the next question. How do I prevent queens from being rejected by colonies?
Yeah, so this is something that I always have a chat with people when they're collecting queens from me. Postage is a bit difficult, but when I'm handing over a queen to someone's hand, I always do a check. Have you found the old queen? Is it a queenless colony that you're putting this queen into? And part of it is because my queens are precious to me, and I want to make sure that they're going to be accepted for their sake as well as the beekeeper. So firstly, you have to know if your colony is actually queenless, because if someone's colony has no brood on a Saturday and they order a queen from me, and they receive the queen, a week later, what might have happened is that colonies actually swarmed. In many cases, that actually means that there's a virgin queen walking around in there, but they just don't know it yet because there's so many bees. And finding one virgin queen in a colony can be a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack sometimes, especially for new bees. Because they walk around on the frame a lot more like a worker bee. They don't have that slow waddle, and they don't have the big bum that's kind of making a space there. And they tend to like zip around and hide because they're just so much more erratic. So getting the timeline of when did I become queenless? Was it because of a swarm, which happens, right? So know that if you've got a queenless colony because you've swarmed, and then you need to go in and find that virgin, because they're built to kill. They're like assassins. So if you put a slow laying queen in there, they won't want her at all. They'll want the queen that they've got walking around unbeknownst to you. So it's always important to know what's the story that you're looking at. What were the intentions of the colony? And I always think and advise people to work with what are the intentions of this colony? Did they intend to swarm? Well, if they did, then there's more than likely a virgin queen in there because that's what bees do. That's why they've survived for millions of years. So find the virgin and get rid of her before you put the mated queen in. And also, so if you've got a mated queen and she's failing or they're spicy or you want to change the strain of bee, then you need to find that mated laying queen in your colony, get rid of her however you feel comfortable killing her. And I always advise people to maybe wait 24 hours before putting the new queen in there, especially for a very strong colony or a colony which is spicy. They can be a little bit more, like they need a little bit more time to come to terms with the fact that the queen that you give them is their best chance. So I always put my queen cages of my mated queens, I rest them on top of my frames and I just observe what the bees are doing with that first. And it's actually a really cool experiment to do because you can gauge a lot by doing that. No, it's not 100% effective, but it's very, very good to see if the bees try to cover her and try and ball her to kill her, or if they're putting their bums down and trying to sting the queen through the cage, you know that there's something that's going on in that colony. You either have a mated queen or you have a virgin queen, and you need to find her because as soon as they get that queen candy out, they'll probably kill her. So resting that queen cage on top of the frames not only is it a fun experiment because you get to see how the bees are reacting to the new queen, but it's just another layer of checking to make sure that they would accept her. And also, once you've put that queen cage in with the candy, well, the candy has to stay in that plug. A lot of new beekeepers that get queens from me say, oh, should I take that candy out? But it has to stay in the queen cage because they chew through that over a number of days. And what happens in that period is the pheromones of that new queen are passed around the hive and they know that that's the queen they're going to have to accept, even if it's a different strain. And then I don't open that hive again for at least a week because I liked the queens to be comfortable, be settled, be laying again. The smell of her brood and her pheromones have passed through the colony enough that everyone's friends. And opening the colony too early can make the bees quite nervous. It actually happened today with me. I was checking my mating nukes and I checked 2 days too early. There weren't meant to be eggs yet. This queen hadn't actually started laying. And as soon as I opened it, I saw this queen walk up onto the top of the frames and some bees tried to start stinging her. So I think I'll probably go into that colony in another week and it'll be queenless because I made them kind of think, oh God, there's something wrong with this queen. It just makes them a little bit nervous if you go in there too early. So I often tell people when you get the queen, you know your colony is queenless. You put that queen cage on top of the frames and just see the waters, make sure everyone's going to be fine. You'll see some feeding going on. What should happen is that they'll know she's there. They'll climb all over the cage, but they won't be doing it in a really aggressive way. They might put their bums up and start fanning to spread her pheromones. And that's kind of the bees' message through the rest of the hive to say, hey, this is a queen. We're fine. We can settle, and we're going to have a mated queen soon. So the fanning is a really good sign. And then once you close it up with the queen cage in there, you leave it for a week so that it just allows them to just settle in. Is that similar to your kind of practice?
If I'm introducing a queen into a colony that I really want to be accepted, I will actually put her into a pushing cage or a frame
Yeah.
cage.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, so that just helps a lot as well. And what a pushing cage is a little cage that you put on top of the brood. You put the queen under it, and the other bees in the colony, they know she's there. They'll feed her, and as the bees emerge from underneath the frame, underneath the cage, uh, they'll think that she's their mother, and they won't know
Mm.
any different. And so they've
Yeah.
already accepted her straight away. And after 3 or 4 days, you can take that cage off, and you get pretty good
Yeah.
acceptance that way. I have moved the cage around a few times if I was being extra cautious, if I've
Yeah.
got a new breeder queen or something coming in. But I find that to be the best method. But I don't do that on my production colonies. On my production
Yeah.
colonies, I just use the regular cage.
Yeah. Yeah. The pushing cage is the standard for reintroducing an inseminated queen as well, for that reason that you want her to still be moving around, to kind of like get everything going where it's supposed to go. But it creates a very long introduction because the bees actually do, we think that they do know that she's different. They do know that an inseminated queen is not a naturally mated queen. So the pushing cage allows for a much longer introduction. So in theory, if you have a really spicy colony that is just, you don't feel it's going to accept a new queen. And you do get those very occasionally where you kind of think, why would you drive yourselves into the ground and not accept these queens that I'm giving you? But a pushing cage is a really nice way to do that, just extend that introduction for a long period. And you're right that all of the baby bees that come out of those capped cells, they don't know any different. They just see, are you my mum?
And when we're talking about instrumentally inseminated queens, it's a whole new ball game. It's very, very different
Yeah.
compared to talking about mated queens, open mated queens. All right.
Yeah.
Before we
Yeah.
finish up
Yeah.
tonight, Laura, is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think I think that one of the things that's been on my radar for a couple of years, and look, it could be a whole other podcast entirely, and I know that you'll be touching on this with people a lot now, is Varroa and how that's impacting beekeepers. And it's a really um, interesting period of time for us to be keeping bees because we're going to remember before Varroa and after Varroa. A lot of beekeepers overseas started beekeeping and they didn't know any different because it's been overseas for such a long time. I mean, in America, it's been there since the early 80s. So many of the beekeepers our age don't know any different. But we're in that space. A lot of your listeners too would be in that space where they have a couple of hives and they're going to remember what it was like before Varroa. So I think that's really interesting as well, that we're just moving through this new landscape of beekeeping, and I think it's going to be really challenging. But the good thing about something like the podcast that you're doing, and there's some other really, really great podcasts and beekeepers from around the world too, is that the information is there for us to find, and the help is there from globally as well. Like I've had some fantastic support from beekeepers overseas too that are really, it's almost like they're invested in us succeeding through this because they feel for us, because they know what it's like to have Varroa, and they have a wealth of information to share with us, and all we have to do is ask. Often they just give a different perspective of what the hands-on management is like for them. So I think I would probably advise people just to talk to as many people that have had it before, just to kind of get a kind of firsthand experience of what it's truly like. We can read a lot of textbooks, and I have read all of them, it feels like, over the past sort of 2 years since it came into Australia. I sort of deep dived into Varroa and read the research papers and listened to all of the everything about it. So I feel like I'm drenched myself in all things Varroa. But we are yet to actually pick it up in any of our colonies. We have an apiary about 20 minutes from home in Berry, and there is Varroa in some hives there, but we're not finding it in our own yet. It could be in ours, but it's not coming up in an alcohol wash yet. So we're like right on a knife's edge. Like, you know, every time I go down to that apiary in particular, I think this is the day. This is when we're going to see it. And I did 2 alcohol washes on each of those colonies because the last time I went down, because I was so certain that it was going to be there, but I still haven't picked it up. So I guess what my parting message is that I've learned, because a lot of the stuff that I've done too is self-taught, is that you can spend a lot of time beating yourself up in agriculture. I think farmers of all sorts would probably relate to that when you're there on your own and your bees are annoyed, or you can't keep your smoker lit, or, you know, you don't have the honey in the box that you were expecting to have, or, you know, you've got hive beetle or whatever it happens to be, that we may spend our whole beekeeping lives with these challenges. And it's good to like lean into that and go, well, this is what I'm learning today. I will learn Varroa management when I have it and I can get my hands into it. I will learn instrumental insemination when I can practice it. And there's nothing wrong with that feeling now of, I don't really know 100%. I'm not proficient in it yet, but that's okay. We'll learn as we go, and that's okay. That feeling of being a little bit uncomfortable is not something that we have to shy away from, because it happens a lot in beekeeping. That you just...
And it sounds like I'll be learning from you.
Yeah. Well, I have made a lot of mistakes. So
given the fact that you're a lot closer than me.
Yeah.
No, all the best with that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on tonight, Laura. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. I know listeners can't see it, but Laura, she's got a beautiful spot on her veranda tonight doing this podcast, and it looks great there. You've got a nice light on the wall, and looks like a nice place to be.
We've got the veggie garden. Yeah, I sit out here and have my coffee and look at the bees on my veggie garden. So this is my go-to place to chill out.
That's excellent. Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Brent.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I'll just let you know that it was recorded a few months ago. So Laura and I recorded this podcast, and a couple of days after that, my wife and I welcomed a new child into our family. So we've been pretty busy, and it's taken me a little bit of time to get this podcast out. Thanks for being patient, Laura. I really appreciate it. And I'll let you know that since this has been recorded, Laura has actually found Varroa in her apiary, and I think she's found it in every colony. So she's dealing with that battle at the moment, but as you heard at the end of the episode, she's feeling very confident and optimistic, so all the best for that, Laura. And another thing that's really cool is she's been doing a lot of instrumentally inseminated queens recently. If you're interested in picking up an II queen and you're in the state of New South Wales, you can jump on her website, which I'll leave in the show notes, and I'm sure she'll have some queens available in the upcoming spring. I'm personally really looking forward to seeing what she's made there, so all the best for that, Laura. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast and you're not a member of the Facebook group yet, make sure you jump into the show notes and join the Facebook group, because that's a good way of getting notifications for new episodes. Also, you could share it with a friend, another beekeeper if you like. Podcasts are actually quite difficult for people to find, so by sharing the Facebook group, it's a way that we can help more people. So thanks for doing that. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you on the next episode.